I think we've all heard about the thing called the space race.
Yes.
Yeah, that global dick measuring contest between the world's two superpowers. And while it was an enjoying show for the rest of the world, um, it had some amazing scientific achievements made. And I just want to clarify before we start that this is less of an educational video, more of an opinion piece. In other words, this is a rant video.
I
And
should put that in
specifically,
front of every single one of our videos.
It's premium cap based Fresno Nightcrawler energy. Love that.
specifically, it's kind of towards the Soviet Union. And I'll explain my position.
Oh, they got
Because in
wild shit.
yeah, because in recent years, I've seen this a lot of memes on Reddit, on Twitter, X, um, that suggests how the Soviet Union was the superior country in the space race. And don't get me wrong, I can tell where this position is coming from, but at the same time, it's just misrepresenting a super complicated situation. And the same way that uh, Trump voters will say that dinosaurs aren't real and it's a ploy for like oil companies. Um, it goes the other way where people will, because of current situations in the U.S., will think that the United States simply. Well, I'll put it in this tweet that was made by a left-leaning communist Twitter account that there was no space race. The USSR was genuinely interested in science and exploration. The only racing was the US, and they lost.
I feel like people forget that Stalin was a guy.
Yeah,
I feel like people just forget that.
yeah. But not only that, because this take is very funny. The USSR definitely used propaganda uh, tied in with the space race.
Oh,
This
like
is
all
definitely
religions.
yeah. And don't be wrong, the US slightly did it, but at the same time, not as obvious as the Soviets would do it.
Mm.
Um, and in like reality, like the situation, like I said, was like a lot more complicated. um, yeah. Um,
I really like these imagery, or the
yeah.
imagery of the last couple slides.
Wait, the dog survived though. He was in that Marvel movie.
Okay. All
Sure,
right.
sure. Yeah, we'll get into that. But for people who've seen this meme, because this was the meme that spread around Reddit like 2 or 3 years ago, and this actually, fun fact, guys, this presentation I'm giving you now was actually first conducted straight after I did my Anga story. This was going to be my second Swag Academy video, but I just didn't have the facts and knowledge to actually tell it until one brave man did it. And this is DKIS era space history. So to those who are watching, actually, we're not live right now, right?
No, we're not. We're not
So
live, but
so I
it'll
don't
still
have
be in
to.
the
I don't have
video.
to apologize.
Get in
Okay,
the comments.
so I don't have to apologize to anybody. But no, I'm joking. But no, this is inspired, but also I had these thoughts prior to the video being made from this guy here, who just did an amazing job. So if you want like an intellectual idea of what I'm talking about today, go watch his video, please. It's really good. But if you want entertainment, because I'm going to be the entertainment part of this, uh, stay here.
Wait, can you assign that as homework?
Yeah, yeah. This is homework. Go watch this video. It's really good. But actually, I will be correcting some of the comments he made in the video. So that's some added stuff to it. So just be aware of that. But at the same time, an amazing video, and he goes into it much more in depth than I will ever do it. And I also want to clarify: this is not a political hit piece. Okay, I
No,
don't care
fuck
if.
that. Russia just nuked the channel. Fuck Russia.
No. What I mean by this is it's not like for me a capitalism versus communism versus socialism or this is not that. I care about the human exploration of space. This is like my main philosophy in life.
Ooh, ooh.
Okay.
Can I say one really quick thing? Just because this picture
Of course.
sparked a neuron in my head. The reason that stars look like that in images taken from, I think this is Hubble, is because there is a crossbeam inside of the telescope that is six beams that intersect and hold the lens in place. And when you take a photo with anything inside of the lens, the flare off of light sources is going to look like whatever object was inside of the lens. So all stars have 6 points when images are taken with Hubble, and your eyeballs have a unique lens flare pattern that is only visible to you because your eye lenses merge in a very specific shape from when you were a little baby. So when you look at stars, they look completely unique and unlike any other stars that anyone else sees. And I think that's neat.
You know what? You are 99% correct. See?
Huh.
You are absolutely 99%
Oh, this
correct.
is not a Hubble picture, is it?
It's not a Hubble picture, but you are correct because this. Wait, wrong thing here. No. This is a Hubble picture,
Oh,
and you're
okay.
correct. Hubble used had a massive mirror, but yes, it had like 4 indicators, and you'd see like the cross here, cross here, cross here, cross here. While James Webb uses 6, and so you'll see this here. By the way, I also want to impress everybody here. These are not actually true colors of what it looks like. Space is surprisingly
Dark.
visually very boring. Like the colors are not great. This is I know these photos inspire so many people, but these are just like hyper saturated images to represent different gases and colors. And
They're
stuff.
like
But,
they're different frequencies. I thought different light frequencies that all get merged.
ultraviolet light X-rays. I think Tim can correct me if I'm wrong here, so I think he might know. But James
Tim,
Webb,
because you're an engineer, you must know everything about it.
James Webb was specifically, I believe, for X-rays.
I think the one of them was definitely made to pick up the actual waves rather than like imagery.
I love the idea that people think of space and specifically like space travel, and they think of like that Wall-E scene where he's flying by the planet and it's all blue and cool and he sticks his hand out and the sparkly bits go out into space, and it's way more like driving a super fast car in the middle of the night, and if you hit something, the only reaction you can have is what the fuck was that, and then it's miles away from you by then.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get started on this little tier list of Soviet accomplishments that I'm gonna kind of
Fibs.
prove my point to. Yeah. So we're gonna do the first satellite. And don't get me wrong, the Soviets did put the first artificial satellite into space. Does anybody know what the name of this thing is?
Oh fuck!
The Iron Giant.
You motherfucker!
It's like those little radio things that fly around in Fallout.
That's
I'm
yeah.
surprised nobody knew this.
No,
I
it's
did. I love
Sputnik. We
this.
know it's
Yes, that's it.
Sputnik.
Thank you.
Okay. So yes, this is Sputnik 1 on the 4th
Yes.
of October 1957. It made its debut
Fun
in
fact:
space.
this is younger than Donald J. Trump.
Oh fuck me! That was actually in the. I'm pretty sure that was on the reel. Yeah, this is younger than both President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump. Yep, don't ruin this video presentation.
So yes, this was the first artificial satellite into space, but the reason why it was the first troubles me slightly.
Oh,
You see, this wasn't originally what Sputnik was supposed to be.
that's true.
Sputnik was supposed to sort of look like this.
Mhm.
It had a lot more scientific instruments to measure the environment of space. But here's the thing: at the same time, the U.S. was developing Explorer 1. Now, Explorer 1 had a couple of little nice gizmos and gadgets on it. It could measure radiation, temperature. It could study micrometeorite elements. It can just do a lot of cool things. And whether the Soviets would have lost if they carried on making Sputnik, we will never know. But the Soviet higher ups were slightly freaked out by this potential that the Americans were going to win the first artificial satellite in space. So they told the engineers to essentially downgrade everything about the original Sputnik, get rid of all the scientific equipment that wasn't ready yet, and essentially
They
make
rushed it out.
what Sputnik became. And they slapped it onto an ICBM, shot it into space, and the next thing they got was this.
Very useful.
Essentially,
Very
yes.
science.
Yeah, yeah.
Boo
Beep
bop.
boop. Actually, this is where my correction comes in from DKIS's video. Is that that the signals are actually representing temperature measurements taken from space, but that's it. And that's the only scientific measurement that was taken on this.
Yeah.
What's
Space be cold.
What's the temperature of space?
Cold.
Very freezing.
Well,
little
You know
chilly
how
on this
heat
Christmas
is-
season.
Yeah. You know how heat is movement, kind of? The
Right,
very
right.
same, like heat causes movement. There is no movement in space.
Yeah.
There's nothing
And
to be moved.
space is kind of weird though, because it is like there is a median temperature, but the problem is it's like at one side you're going to have the blazing heat of the sun, the other side you're going to have the freezing colds of space.
Hey, it's just like that book.
Yeah. But
A Song of Ice and Fire.
yeah, so yes, I guess the USSR managed to beat the Americans on this one.
All right, let me counterpoint. These were the first objects being sent into space, right? Like the U.S. had not seen or heard from space up until this point. They had no idea what was up there. How actually?
Correct.
Oh shit!
I'll get to that in a second.
Never mind then.
For the Americans were still a little bit ass-mad though, because this is the first object in orbit.
Yes, orbit was the thing the Sputnik achieved.
But mostly the American opinion on this was that, like, sure, it was a hit to the prestige, but like the nuclear implications here were a little bit staggering. And by the way, the USSR was counting on that.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily first object in space that they were going for. It was, we have an ICBM system capable of entering space. That was the more important achievement.
Yeah. So if we were to
Sorry,
oh, sorry, go.
sorry. I want to interject with something that I find quite funny. So Sputnik was battery powered, had no solar panels, and the batteries lasted about 3 months, and then Sputnik fell out of orbit and burned up. No problem, all satellites happen. However, there is one piece of Sputnik left, and it was a safety pin. Well, I say safety pin, but it was a pin that stopped the batteries touching. It was taken out, the rocket was launched. Do you want to guess where that safety pin is now?
Orbit?
Where?
NASA owns it.
Irony.
You know what, Phil? Very good job, Tim. Like you're the top student once again. Because,
Goddamn, the teacher's giving out gold stars.
Yeah, I was gold star definitely to Tim because I was going to compare the capabilities here. Because Sputnik lasted about 1,400 orbits in space. Just roughly around 3 months. Explorer 1 had a pretty impressive 58,375
One of
orbits.
those numbers has another number on the end of it. One of those numbers goes for 4 and the other one goes for 5.
And while, yes, Sputnik lasted 3 months, and I want to clarify, Explorer 1 did only survive for 4 months, though that was expected due to the battery life of Explorer 1. However, it stayed in orbit for 12 years.
Wait a minute. So why did Sputnik fall out of orbit then?
It's just based on their trajectory. It
I
wasn't.
think, yeah, there's also certain shapes. Like Sputnik, I think because it was spinning a lot after it ran out of battery, but just got like, it's easier for spinning things to get sucked into each other's orbit or something dumb. I don't know this exact science. I'm not a science magician.
All you need to know is to get things into space, you go high, but then you also have to go in really fast.
Yes.
Yeah, in a very fast direction. And the way the Soviets just launched it, it was just enough to get into orbit, but drag from the atmosphere would slowly bring it down. So whether if you want to take this as the Americans being able to put something in a more stable orbit, or that the US was just lazy to clean up their rubbish, take it as you will. But I mean, at the end of the day, what we got was either a radio handset that can tell the weather, or
in space, not the weather on Earth, the weather in space.
Yeah, or knowing like the Americans finding out that there's a radiation belt that has massive implications of whether if life can survive on outside the Earth, and also things like weather and other phenomenal.
Look, kids, radiation's good for you.
I was really curious about this. How useful were the first scientific measurements of space? Because did they even know what to look for?
Well, this is my point. Explorer 1 was very useful. There's a reason like why we still use this data and information today, because it's super important from the first launch by the Americans.
Yeah.
Sputnik, okay, we know the temperature, I guess. That's pretty cool. But like my overall point was that this idea that the Soviets were doing it for scientific purposes and the Americans weren't is just in the first launch is just proven itself kind of wrong in that sense.
That image of Explorer also kind of like tells you or gives the implication as well of like the magnetic poles and how they actually shape and look around the Earth too, which is fun and interesting.
Because at the time we obviously didn't know what space was like. We didn't know if humans could even survive in space, and we needed to know if there was radiation and things like that. You know? So,
send Krusty.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, sorry, I thought you called my name.
No, there was a command to send you to space.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Please
I was saying send Krusty to space. He'll find out if it's radioactive or not.
Yeah, he'll eat the stars.
Yeah.
He'll eat it like uranium candy.
Delicious.
RNX first space rocket, and I put us into first in space category. The Soviets were not the first in space. Would anyone like to guess the country who was the first in space? Tim, you are banned from that.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I know the answer. So.
Ooh.
I'm gonna say it was Britain.
I'm gonna guess something outlandish. I'm gonna say it's Madagascar.
I'm gonna say like South Korea.
Okay.
I don't think South Korea existed yet.
I'm gonna say Korea.
I don't know that Korea existed yet.
Korea was a thing. That's why
okay.
they have a North and South now.
I hope Tim is laughing right now, because if any of you guess Nazi Germany, that is correct.
I should have gone for that.
This is a V2 missile. In fact, my grandfather.
Yo, that's a VTuber?
Shut up.
Boo. I'm not even reacting to that joke. No.
You said boo, you reacted.
The V2 missile, actually, my grandfather was on the street, and it was hit by a V2 missile. It's a little fun fact. What he did, the one comment he did make about it was that he said the good thing about the V2 missile was that with a bomb, you have a whistle, you have no idea where it's coming from. The V2 was very loud when it came hitting the ground, so you could always know where it was going to hit. But yeah, so I do find it interesting that my grandfather was one of the first victims of missile attacks in human history. So yeah. Hey. Anyway, that fact proven out of the way for the first space rocket and first in space, it being completely false. First living thing in space. This wasn't on the chart, but I've heard this from many people before, but the Soviets put the first living thing in space.
Okay.
Now, this is questionable because a lot of people will go and assume Laika, and you would be mistaken. And we'll get to
a
Laika.
monkey.
Yeah, we'll get to
Wait, no. I don't think... Was it a monkey? I feel like I remember hearing a story about some of the first things they sent into space, and one of them was like lizards or geckos got sent to space.
Well,
we're about to find out.
Yeah, we're about to find out. Sorry.
We'll get to Laika in a second, even though her story is very depressing. So I went down this little rabbit hole, and I had to go and dig and dig and dig and dig. So you could argue, technically speaking, that the first mice, the first living thing in space was mice, American mice. And then you'd be misunderstood, and it was actually Albert II, this little rhesus monkey, who is an American patriot.
Yeah, monkey.
But he actually isn't the first living thing in space. You could argue that little fruit flies, American fruit flies, were the first thing in space.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
I believe that.
Patriot.
I'm proud to be an American.
But then you could technically argue, if you really wanted to,
Bacteria.
Okay.
exactly correct, that there was
Organisms.
Nazi
potential
bacteria.
So it was more likely that there might have been Nazi bacteria in space before any living thing got up there.
What is the
So-
demonetization symbol covering?
What do you think it's covering?
Why is okay, let me rephrase. Why on the internet does there exist a picture of a bacteria in a spacesuit with a Nazi symbol on it? That's what I want to know.
The
For
bag's
this
asking
exact
why
reason.
too.
It's movie magic, okay? Just-
That's the
That'll
special
work.
effects degree at work.
I mean, really, tardigrades are probably the first living things in space, and they came from all over the place.
They're probably still
Yeah.
up there. Nazi tardigrades are still in space. I want that on a shirt.
Nazi
Yeah.
tardigrades are still in space.
So the next one, first man, first woman, and first dog in space. Now I'm gonna start with the dog, because this girl needs my respect. Laika.
Oof, woof.
Laika is the first dog in space and first living thing to orbit the Earth. Now Laika's story is very disheartening.
Yes.
So she was a mutt puppy from the streets of Moscow. They made it clear that they needed a stray dog, not someone's pet, because this was a one-way mission.
Dog was not coming back.
Yeah. In the first few hours of the flight, Mission Control lost Laika, as in they couldn't find her.
Horrible image, but funny.
Cursed for this topic. Yeah.
I like that the Nick logo is still there
Still
because it's
there.
part of the picture.
Sputnik. Get it?
Wow. Krusty,
Yeah.
you're so smart.
About 5 to 7 hours into the mission. Well, here's the thing: they couldn't track her, but they could detect her life, like her heartbeat, her temperature, her like movement, and things like that. And a few hours into the flight, she was fine until she started moving rapidly, and her heart rate started to increase. And then about 5 to 7 hours into the flight, they noticed that she had sadly passed away, burning up in the temperatures as they increased. Now, this is like a dark reality we all have to face when it comes to early space exploration, is that we used animals to experiment and test whether we could go to space. But my whole overall point here is, when researching the American space program with animals, there was always an attempt to bring these animals back down to the ground, to either study them or to just human rate a vehicle. The
Yeah, I
Soviets
mean-
didn't ever have that ambition with Laika. She was a propaganda piece. She was used to get there first. And while this might be controversial today, I can guarantee you this was definitely controversial for the time. With a lot of people being very upset. The Soviet Union just to get that first burnt a dog alive in space.
I mean,
Um,
even from a practical standpoint, retrieving your test subject is a more useful result than just like throwing them at the sun and seeing how long it takes for them to die.
Yeah, exactly.
It goes against that very almost like historic or like built up city kind of idea of like using everything you get because everything is so important around you. Like even if you have to kill something to eat to live, it's like you're doing it so that you're using all the parts of it and appreciating that respectfully, right? This is not respectful. This was like you said, to get that first place medal. It was like we did it, guys. Look.
Yeah, exactly. And there was actually, because of her death and because of the loss of the the vessel that she was in, there was no scientific achievement actually. Well, sure, putting a living thing in space, but learning how to actually survive in space, it didn't really help. But to prove not to prove my point, but to explain that kind of concept of like, does this make any sense and stuff? Well, sounds horrible, but there's a reason why we remember Laika and we don't remember Ham being the chimpanzee sent to space, because Laika was the first. And I think she should be respected for that. And she like, while yes, a horrible sacrifice, and I think it's quite a horrible thing to do. She is seen in history as the first living thing to orbit the Earth. So, good for her. But as a space kitty, who was the first cat in space?
Krusty.
Does anybody know?
Unsinkable Sam. He was on the he was on the Challenger.
Didn't like
Oh, I should have done the Big Bird story for the Challenger. Oh,
wasn't
God.
like
I mean, wait. Have any of you heard the Big Bird thing about the Challenger?
I don't
Big
think
Bird?
so.
I have.
No.
Yeah, Big Bird was supposed to be on the Challenger when it exploded.
Yo.
Oh my god. No, I didn't know
And
that.
I don't know why, but the idea of Challenger exploding and just yellow feathers. Like,
no, that's the reason why the Challenger exploded. Because Big Bird was on it.
I have
Fucked it
to
up.
cut all of this.
I think they actually it was planned to be live streamed to schools as well. It actually was part of the
Yeah.
launch was, but Big Bird
teacher.
wasn't because the costume was too big to fit through the hatch.
yeah,
That's
it
the
was
only
free-
reason Big Bird wasn't martyred in 1960 something.
Yeah. But that was the thing, because like NASA had a choice. They could either put Big Bird into space or a school teacher. And so they went with school teacher. So it was streamed to like a bunch of children. That's why
Yeah.
Challenger is so remembered. Because so
Yeah.
many children watching live on TV, a teacher get blown out of the sky.
Do you think Sesame Street would have had to canonically kill Big Bird?
Probably.
Man, fuck. I feel like they could have. Man.
Your brain doesn't even want to wrap around that concept.
It's like if you could. Oh, it's sad either way.
Just
It's not if you
imagining
go
the
like,
fucking
oh, we are
Sesame
replacing
Street
him.
funeral.
Man, at least Big Bird didn't get jihaded in a missile.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Continue, Christy.
Are we cutting this bit out too?
No,
Just
no,
kidding.
this stays in.
Well, the first cat in space was a little cat called Felicite.
Oh,
He was a French cat
what a
by
boy.
the French space program. He launched, and guess what? He survived because
Yo.
French were actually
Because cats
confident.
can't fucking die.
Yeah,
Exactly.
9 lives.
However, unfortunately, he did die 6 months later, mostly because the French dissected him and wanted to know how his body reacted to being in space. So they just
Oh.
Bet. They waited 6 months. They were like, all right, you can have a little more kitty time.
Well, they probably waited till the news around cat died down. And
Yeah.
they were like, how's the cat doing? And then they were like, okay, is anyone wondering about the cat? Okay, cool. Yeah, let's open this cat up.
That's probably
Yeah. So yes, I guess they managed to get the first animal into orbit, but at what cost? That's the real question.
They got the first animal into orbit, and then they got the notification everyone disliked that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the world reaction wasn't exactly super pleased. Anyways, moving on to lighter subjects. Does anybody know the name of this handsome fellow?
Oh, Yuri
an
something.
Armstrong?
I can't remember his
Oh,
name.
is that Yuri?
Yuri.
Yuri?
I can't remember his last name.
I also can't remember his last name.
Yeah, I don't have a guess, but I'm gonna say something Yuri. The last name I can't remember either.
I thought it was like
Yeah.
Yuri... No, go ahead.
This is Yuri Gagarin.
Gagarin, damn it!
that's it.
Oh.
Who on the 12th of April 1961 became the first man to enter orbit, or first man who went to space. However,
Also, sorry.
Sorry.
While he was in space, he was temporarily top G.
Top G.
engineering.
Oh.
That's pretty cool.
It's a G-force.
Um,
Don't worry.
So
Anyways.
I may have forgotten to mention the reason why they didn't bring Laika down was because the Soviet Union at the time didn't really have the capability to bring Laika back to
Yeah.
Earth.
They had no retrieval system.
When you
Yeah.
said bring Laika down, my brain immediately just cut to like an image of like a giant Laika stomping through the city and someone going like, Bring her down.
Kaiju dog. She's back and she's pissed.
Yeah. Well, Yuri had the same problem as Laika, because at the time, the Soviets really didn't actually have a way to bring Yuri down, besides one really stupid and dangerous way of doing it.
Like most Soviet technology at the time.
Yeah. So, the majority of the world and throughout history, space travel in general, the way we've done bring back humans to Earth is through think of parachutes.
Yeah,
Aware what
parachutes.
parachute is.
All my homies love parachutes.
I love a parachute.
Yeah. So Yuri's coming back into Earth at several thousand kilometers an hour.
Sir, that is a chicken pot pie.
And
I could go for a chicken pot pie.
His capsule kind of looks like this. Now, I want to clarify here. At this point in re-entry, this part of the ship would have been disconnected. So it'd be like a big round ball.
Oh, like Sputnik.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
And the problem is when you have a vehicle that is a spherical shape coming into really high speeds, you're going to get a lot of oscillation.
Let's play Spin the Planet, Princess.
Let's play Spin the Meat Bag.
Yeah. Well, luckily for Yuri, the way they designed it is his chair was almost like a different disconnected capsule.
Oh, so the outside span. And the inside.
Well, no. He was spinning with the ship in this rate. He was definitely spinning with the ship. And so the way, obviously, they didn't have the parachute capability to bring the ship down to the ground safely. So before it hit the ground, Yuri was ejected.
Oh my god!
Out of the side of the ship for a capsule, and while
while spinning,
the capsule would, while spinning, and the capsule would hit the ground and make a massive crater, and he would have to essentially parachute his way down to the ground. Now, I want to just explain why this is a very dangerous thing to do.
If the ball spins the wrong way, you're just ejecting the guy faster into the earth, right?
I was gonna say the same thing. What if he's pointing the wrong way?
What if the ball's the wrong way?
Well, that's his problem.
Not to mention, the number of G's he would be experiencing in this situation, but also astronauts when they come back from space, there's a lot of medical issues you have to go through because
it's like the opposite of like when you dive. It's with scuba where you get like the bends because like the pressure's so much different.
Yes, it's a similar situation. Your blood has to start recalibrating the Earth's gravity. And you've seen a lot of footage, and you can look it up, lots of footage of astronauts coming back on Earth, and they just faint during interviews and stuff because their blood is not connecting to the heart. Even recently, SpaceX had a landing, and someone was hospitalized, and it was like front cover news. This is actually a really normal phenomenon that astronauts, after they've been in space for so long, will partially faint quite often.
It's the train derailments of space travel. It's more common than you think, but it's like headlining news when it happens.
Yeah, and so the idea of having Yuri go in a parachute and after he's just been in space as a risky. There's a reason why astronauts are not allowed to get out of their capsules once they land, just to be safe, to make sure that they're not. Nothing bad happens or anything.
Like they acclimatize correctly.
Yeah. So a few months later, this handsome man went to space. Can anybody tell me who this is?
No.
Is this Armstrong? Is this an Aldrin?
Not Yuri. Neither Armstrong nor Aldrin were in these tests, I'm fairly certain.
I'm
not sure then.
The first American into space? Anybody? Not Tim. I know Tim's holding
I'm not American,
back.
so I legally don't have to know.
I don't know either. So
I'm sure I'll say when you say the name.
His name was Alan Shepard.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Wait, I'm gonna Google whether or not Commander
Alan
Shepard
Shepard
was named after this guy.
Oh my god, that'd be actually really cool.
Probably.
Let me know the results.
Man, remember when those games were good?
Yeah. Hey, fun fact, they weren't. Have someone who's never played Mass Effect play through those games. The opening of Mass Effect 1 is dog ass.
It's slow. Yeah, it's slow. But it's got a little bit of charm.
Hey, Mass Effect, don't diss the Mass Effect trilogy, man. I love
Mass
game.
Effect, the end of Mass Effect 1.
$4.97. It's on sale for less than $5 on Steam.
Confirmed.
Free game.
Confirmed. Commander Shepard was named after Alan Shepard. That's pretty cool.
That's really
Ooh.
Nice. So now the reason why I find this trip a little more interesting was just due to the fact that the Mercury capsule had a parachute
nice.
and could land.
Nice.
And they wanted to bring the capsule back down to the ground and be able to
Reuse it.
test it. Yeah. And this is how we do it to this day. There's a reason why we do this way and not this way.
Yeah.
Okay? But Yuri does claim the first man in space. I have to admit that. One thing I don't respect though is the fact his death is very mysterious. He was a test pilot, and one of the days he was flying for his hours, his plane crashed, and the Soviet Union never released the reasons why it crashed, which makes me believe that it might have been an attempted assassination. But that's just an opinion.
Hey, it's not like in recent history anybody's plane that the Russian people didn't like, Russian government didn't like, went down mysteriously for no reason.
Yeah. To be fair,
all I'm
to
gonna
this
say
day-
is, sorry,
go on, Tim.
it couldn't have been an assassination because he didn't fall out of a window.
Hey, he could have ejected out of that plane window.
Yeah.
Oh, that is
no.
true. That is true.
Because they just attach ejector buttons to all of his seats.
What I'm saying is, there's a lot of secrets being held, and they released it when the Russian Federation became a thing, but they never released the investigation of Yuri, which is my theory is that he was becoming very popular because he was like the world's most famous man at the time, and people weren't really happy about it. But that's just a conspiracy theory.
Can I ask Tim a quick engineering question?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just like very briefly tell me how much harder is it to build a parachute that can stop a space capsule versus a parachute that can hold a man?
Oh, jeez.
Like, is it harder than just building a bigger parachute?
Well, yeah, because you have to account for the heat and the friction as well of coming down, because it needs to be able to stop that. And that's why they also usually have multiple ones, right?
Yeah. So with like well, first of all, obviously you need a bigger parachute first of all, but bigger means it'll catch more air, means you need a lot stronger lines and so on. There's also the risk that if it doesn't fold correctly or it breaks when it comes out, you don't have no parachute. So that's why like the Apollo capsules when they landed, they had 3, but only needed 2 to survive technically. Because then actually on one of I forget which mission, but one of the parachutes got cut when it was launched. So they ended up landing with only 2 parachutes instead of the normal 3, but still made it safely. So yeah, it is quite a lot of work to do a proper full size parachute. Not to mention you're going a lot faster on reentry as opposed to just like skydiving.
Sure. And the Russian scientists were just could not be bothered.
Well, just that it could also be the risk of they may have just legitimately not been able to do it because it is a very, very, very heavy shock when it first comes out, and if you don't have the right rope or the right steel twine, it will just snap.
Doesn't that kill? Not kill. Doesn't that really injure whoever's inside the capsule?
That's why you can't just do a just pull the pin and the parachute comes out. You have to do it either slowly or have very, very big shock absorbers on the person's seat. Otherwise, you'll snap their spine.
If you see the videos of them, they launch out first and trail behind a bit, and then they spread out. And some of them have holes in the top of them so that the friction doesn't catch as much, and some airflow can go through while it still slows down the ship.
Even some of them will launch parachutes higher in the atmosphere, and then the parachute will cut, and the second set of parachutes will come in.
Yeah,
like staged re-entry parachutes. That's cool.
Yeah, I will be honest. I am not a parachute engineer. I don't claim to fully understand the science of how I understand how they work, but I don't understand the science of how.
In a field, you don't know everything about every other
exactly.
Field
Exactly.
Oh,
I'm not an expert in parachutes.
I am going to give Max though a golden star.
I like that. This is a running thing now.
Yeah, because he used the term redundancy. And this is a very important thing that comes up later in the presentation.
I think I legitimately learned redundancies and the importance of it from learning about the Cold War. Because I was the Russians just don't build for redundancy.
They still don't.
Yeah.
They still don't.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. But to my overall point, I think we kind of got the picture. While this was a massive blow to the U.S. morale, and a victory for the U.S., and he was a massive world celebrity. Everybody wanted to talk to him. I even met the Queen of England at the time, so it's pretty cool. But the idea that the USSR was willing to kill off one of her men to get that first, kind of proves.
Yeah, they're really
another
lucky
proves
he
my
didn't
point.
die.
Yeah, he was very, very lucky.
Mm.
But anyway, can anybody name this lovely woman?
The first lady in space.
And if you
God.
can't name her, you are all sex. I'm joking. There's a reason why you don't
I
know
can't
her.
name anybody because I don't follow a lot of the astronaut history, unfortunately. So your
Now,
guess is as good as mine.
To be fair, there's a reason why she is not really named a lot, and but I'm gonna guess nobody could name her here, unless Tim can name her.
I don't think so. I'll be honest. I'm sorry.
Sexist. No, I'm joking. This is Valentina Tereshkova.
Was
she
she wasn't she was like the first woman on the moon, right?
What?
No, she
No.
was the first woman in space.
Oh, okay.
Which has the
60
moon in it, so
has
it's
the
close
moon,
enough.
Moon is in it.
You're about like a couple 100,000 kilometers off, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Dang.
She became the first woman in space on 6th of June 1963. Now, why did the Soviets send a woman to space? Was it for equality? Was it because she was a trained astronaut or cosmonaut, sorry, and that she was just qualified for the job?
All right,
Or was it the
I don't know her story. I'm just gonna guess because Russia, she was a prisoner of some kind.
I got to guess similar. I think it's because she was light, like weight wise, like small human, and that was like
You
the
know-
primary objective.
You know what's funny? The reason is way more petty than you think.
Oh, it's worse than both of ours.
Is it because she's less valuable because she's a woman? Is in their
Mm,
eyes? Is that
no, not even that.
okay? All right.
Somehow pettier than that.
Yeah.
The main reason why was essentially because the Americans are training an astronaut in the early 60s.
Oh, yeah. Trend hopping, as they call it.
And the Soviets don't like it when the Americans have something that they don't have.
Can you do me a quick editing favor and just re-say that sentence that they were training a female astronaut? You cut out, and I really want that in the video.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it was because the Americans were training female astronauts for the Apollo program. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Zing.
Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. I recommend you actually research these people. They're amazing people. They unfortunately, because of societal purposes, never made it to the moon. But they were trained as astronauts, and they had a full training program.
This is separate from the Hidden Figures, right? Those
Yeah,
were
those
mathematicians. These
people-
are actual astronauts.
Yes. These are the
Yeah.
mathematicians behind sending the first guy to the moon.
Yeah. These were actually trained for they were all experienced pilots and all that, so they were all perfectly trained.
Hey, shout out to the U.S. in the '60s having experienced female pilots. By the way, equality.
Mhm. Yeah. So the Soviets didn't have a women's space program, so they had to kind of make one, but they didn't really make one.
She's very
So-
intense looking.
Yeah.
She's Russian.
So what they did was they essentially grabbed a woman from an engineering course who had some skydiving experience,
Mhm.
strapped her in a suit, and then threw her up into space. And this is where the issues become very interesting. So during her trip, she essentially tries to impress the ground control team, as she was claiming that everything was normal. Things were definitely not normal. She was feeling very ill and was struggling to eat her space food. And Mission Control were completely aware that this was occurring for her vitals, but she just wouldn't admit to it. She would later then claim, while she's on her mission, that she had to take control of the ship to make evasive maneuvers. She didn't. Or should I say she couldn't, because the entire flight was on a trajectory that she could not control or modify. And Mission Control were also very aware of this. So she's up there going, like, I'm making evasive maneuvers to go into this angle. mission control guys are just kind of like, sure, okay.
It's like, yeah, we know you're not, but thumbs up.
Yeah.
Mm.
As long as you're
So,
having a good time, that's all that matters.
Could have been space
Yeah.
madness.
Yeah. So when she came back down safely, and the mission control on the okay, we get some of your space food just to make sure that like something didn't like poison you to make you feel like sick and stuff. And she went, well, about that. I kind of gave all my space food to the hungry villagers that managed to help me get out of my capsule.
What a chat.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the Soviet team was their response was kind of like, what the fuck? Because they needed that space food to actually study the food to make sure that it wasn't something wrong with the food. When it came to like scientific data acquired from this mission, she essentially got rated a 0 out of 10 because nothing was really learned. But I want to position another thing as well, because before you give her prompts or give her any sort of like sympathy or anything, she's still alive today,
Yo.
and she happens to be in the Russian Parliament, and I wonder what party she happens to be a part of.
Interesting.
Funny enough, they still use her as propaganda as proof of Soviet equality and things like that, even though the Soviet Union is dead.
Look how great
And-
things are for this one woman from a different country.
Yeah. What's funny as well is to this day she still claims that she took evasive maneuvers, even though that was literally impossible to do. Though I wonder to the American people in this video call right now, to who the first American woman was in space.
Whoa, why does she look like? Why does she look like she's from Alien?
Who do you think
I
they
wonder if that's
modeled
an
her after?
inspiration too.
I bet it was.
Now, to be fair, the Americans took way too long for this to happen. But to give America credit, because this was hyped up in the media a lot, that we're going to put the first woman in space. But for NASA, it wasn't about putting the first woman in space, it was putting a trained astronaut into space. Because they needed somebody who was actually qualified for the job. And Sally Ride was definitely qualified for the job. And so, sure, the US was way late to the game. But they actually put somebody who was actually capable of being in space, not because she was a woman, but because she was an astronaut. While the Soviets were very big on pushing that they got the first woman into space, even though she had, putting her life in danger for not being a trained cosmonaut in the first place. But the US didn't really care at this point because they were working on something much bigger. Something bigger than getting the firsts and all that. And that goal was the moon.
The moon, baby.
Moon.
Sorry, before we move on, can I say one more thing about Sally Ride?
Yeah.
Of course, yes.
Sally Ride was lesbian,
Sick.
Oh my god.
so she was also the first LGBT astronaut.
Oh my god.
The real question is, was she out at the time in the 80s?
Yeah, I was about to say, unless anybody else before then was closeted in that same sort of bacteria argument that can be made about
Yeah.
in space. Yeah.
Hey, there've been gay monkeys. They're monkey up there.
There have been gay monkeys.
Exactly.
Like,
Careful, Alex
It's not-
Jones.
the turn you said that you were like, exactly, yeah.
They're turning the monkeys gay.
We got the space radiation and turning the freaking monkeys gay.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Continue. Now the moon's a bitch.
Yeah,
I
so now we're going to move on to the first moon landing. Now, I'm going to put moon landing in quotation. Because when both countries were trying to figure out what the fuck the moon was, they couldn't just land on it. They didn't know if you could land on it. So what they did was crash land on it.
Nice.
And this was done by the Soviets on 12th of September 1959. Now, you might realize that the name is Luna 2 and not Luna 1.
Did they miss?
Luna 1.
They did miss the moon.
Was it like a miss through not going far enough, or was it a miss through going past?
They kind of just went past it and it
was gonna
shot off
say,
into deep space.
you know that inspirational quote, if you shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. Russian scientists invented that phrase.
Yeah, it's also the real. You see, the issue with that phrase, it's like those phrases that like actually have two parts to them. It's like if you do land among the moon or among the stars, you better have a good like capacity to actually go to those stars too and pick it back up and take it back home.
Nah, I'm
'Cause
among the
there's
stars
now
now.
just metal in space.
Can I just really quickly? Why do Russian space capsules all look like steel balls?
Because they had a vibe. It's a great aesthetic. Hey,
Like,
you can't. It's a
it's
propaganda machine.
such
You know
a-
what's
Stylish.
you've just mentioned it, and now that I look through my entire presentation,
They're
you are
all
absolutely correct.
Yeah, literally every Russian
They
capsule
did-
you've shown us is a ball.
They did the first one wrong, and they refused to admit that it was wrong, and then they just kept doing it.
It just like it looks like it's their visual style at this point, and that has
Yeah.
to have been such a bitch to manufacture like giant steel pressure vessels like that. Like, because I get it, I do understand the engineering. It's because it's a sphere is the the optimal pressure vessel for having equal pressure on all sides, but you can use a cylinder and achieve most of the same effect and have more room for your human being inside of it.
This one doesn't have a human being, to be fair.
Well, sure, but when you're working on it, you still have to not be cramped when
Yeah.
you're installing shit.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
remember, they don't build for redundancy, they build for what they can do. with
They
the
built
best
a
of what
bunch
they
of
have.
metal softballs and threw them as hard as they could into space.
Tony Stark built it in a cave with a bunch of scraps.
So yeah, the USSR were the first to smash the thing into the moon. I mean, it was after a couple of attempts,
Ooh.
but they finally got it.
Wait a
Good
second.
for them.
Lucky number 7.
You said Luna 2, and that says 6 attempts.
Yeah, they tried again, and
I don't know if they get to call it Luna 2.
we'll get to that in a second. To be fair, though, the Americans did miss as well, but at least they had 4 successes because they wanted to be extra sure that their math was
Again,
right.
build for it. You gotta build for redundancy.
Yeah, exactly. However, Russia did do a soft landing on
So
Luna
tiny.
first, with Luna 9, and it lasted 3 days, 3rd of February to 6th of February 1966, and took this pretty cool picture, the first ever picture of the surface of the moon.
Ooh.
Now,
That's
this is where
not what I thought the moon would
Sorry,
look
go on.
like. And so it looks like it's covered in frosted flakes.
It's got
It-
pockmarks because it keeps getting smacked by stuff.
Yeah, it is actually a grainy. It's not like it's an old image from 1960, so like it's not gonna be super detailed or anything. But actually, what Max brought up before about Luna 2 being named Luna 2, this is actually where it becomes very interesting. So we have Luna 9. This did a successful landing on.
Spoiler.
Successful crash.
Yeah.
Successful crash.
Then we go to Cosmos 111, which was a failure. Then you get to Luna 10. That was a success. And then you get to Luna 1966A. It's a failure. Do you notice a little pattern here?
They keep renaming things to make it seem like it's the first or second of the thing that's happening.
Max, you get another gold star.
It's a propaganda machine.
Yeah, the Soviets never really wanted to admit their failure. They would just assume, no, this was not a part of the Luna project. This was a part of the Cosmos project. And it was the 111th attempt of flying a Cosmos project. Or if they never actually recorded it or released it to the public, they just call it Luna and then the date of the launch because they never released the actual publication of the failure. But then, so yeah, sure, the Americans landed in 1966 in February, followed by Surveyor 1, the American first landing on the moon. First attempt, by the way. And instead of surviving for 3 days, it survived for 6 months.
That's pretty good.
In fact, it was so good that it was not expected to survive the lunar nights because on the moon, you have nights that would last, especially near the poles, like 2 or 3 weeks. And everything gets frosty and your thing will shut down. But this thing kept surviving every single the sun would come up, it would wake up, which surprised all the engineers on the ground. So I guess, yes, the Soviets were the first to soft land on the moon, but at this point, the Americans were just kind of not really interested in the first because they were actually like collecting data for future projects.
It's like releasing a game, right? You got to make sure the game is good when it releases because people remember the release, and that it will. Even if it's bad in release, people will remember that even if it gets better later.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure Hidetaka Miyazaki said that when he was working on the Russian space program.
Yeah. Well, no, that he was working on the NASA space program.
I see. All right. So just so we don't lose the plot here, this is still a pissing contest. It's just that the U.S. was taking pride in doing it better than the Russians, not first.
Yeah, at this point, like, don't get me wrong, I think the Americans were definitely aiming to be first. I mean, they were ass mad that Alan Shepard didn't become the first man in space. But safety came first.
Right.
And getting the job done came first.
There was a standard.
Humans were not also considered disposable components of spacecraft.
Yeah. Well, it's also like, even at that time, it's like, yes, there are lots of like terrible things done in the pursuit of science, and we can't ever escape that, and it's something that's important to raise. But at the same time, there was still a standard of safety that American scientists tried to take into account at points.
Yeah,
and we appreciate that. When we also have the alternative of the USSR that did not appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll get to it in the end of the presentation. But what had a better impact on space exploration, getting there first or doing it properly?
Mm-hmm.
But we'll speed run this one. The first spacewalk, yes, this was done by the Russians with the Voskhod 2 mission achieved by Alexei Leonov on the 18th of March 1965. Now, this mission did not go without its issues. For example, his suit started to gain internal pressure, which translates to essentially that he started blowing up like a balloon.
Oof.
So much so he couldn't fit back into the spacecraft. So he had two options. Now, this is a bit controversial because in a recent interview he gave about the mission, he claimed that he had a suicide pill available to him just in case he wouldn't be able to get into the craft. I questioned that because where would that suicide pill be?
In his helmet?
Or already enough?
Well, if it was in the helmet, I feel like this would have been a bigger thing known. But it's never been known that Soviet astronauts had a pill accessible to their mouths to take just in case something went wrong. I can assure you that American astronauts never had this equipped to their helmets.
Also, like, what's the mechanism for activating it? Like, because you can't, like... Is that like a button at the side of... You don't want to accidentally press the suicide pill button on the side of your helmet.
Yeah, exactly. So his excuse being like, oh, at least it would be a painless death. Though, if it's not in his helmet, then it must be, well, maybe they had pockets. I don't think they did, but there might be. I don't know. I don't know the internals of a CCP.
How do you open up the space suit?
Well, you could technically remove the helmet, but
at that point,
at that point, it wouldn't become a painless death anymore. It'd be a horrible experience. But yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of problems. He managed to cut entry into a suit and release the pressure and managed to fit into the craft again. But you know, this was in contrast with the Americans sent Ed White on Gemini 4. Sorry, Gemini 4. It's not pronounced Gemini. Even NASA admits this, as much as it sounds weird. But Gemini 4 sent Ed White, and he did the first spacewalk for the Americans.
That's a pretty sick looking spacesuit, by the way. I feel like
that's a good spacesuit.
We have not returned to how cool spacesuits looked in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. Like when we go to do like space travel things, especially in video games, they will get like sleek, teched up stuff. But this still looks actually cool. Like I understand.
Yeah.
Like they want it to be like cool action hero super, but like you could do it with this. This is a great look.
There's a scene in, I don't really bring up this presentation, I was going to, but there's a scene in the show called For All Mankind where it's an alternate reality where the Soviets win the space race, like as in they land on the moon and stuff. And so America still continues the moon missions. And so there's a time where the Soviets and the Americans are both on the moon. And there's one scene that is really, really cool where one of the American astronauts bumps into one of the Soviet cosmonauts, and there's no scene that is, like goes as hard as like two of the suits just like staring each other down because you can't see their faces or anything, but just like kind of like looking at each other intimidatingly. It's just like really, and they can't communicate either. So they're just like having to like slowly walk around each other, and yeah, I recommend the first 2 seasons.
Oh, does it get weird?
It gets bad, yeah.
Oh.
Third season's just fucking terrible. But anyway, yeah, so Ed White, he had a mission and it went great, but I would actually point out the important mission being Gemini 8, piloted by Buzz Aldrin, actually. This is Buzz right here. The reason why this mission was more important was because they actually got Buzz to do a bunch of tasks while he was in the vacuum space. So, like,
he did his
tasks,
things. And they voted off the traitors.
Yeah, yeah. He did a bunch of tasks on the side of the ship. He maneuvered his arms and did test the suit to make sure that everything was working for things like better life support systems, general technology, and everything, because it was all to do with the aim of getting to the moon and being able to land on the moon. I even bring this up slightly. The first docking ever was done by the Americans. This mission did go wrong.
You can't show docking on YouTube like this.
I know. I can't believe you would actually put this image in the presentation. Avert your eyes.
This mission did go wrong. It was commanded by Neil Armstrong himself, so he's in this little capsule here doing the little dirty work.
The dirty work.
But this mission went horribly wrong because after a couple of minutes of docking, the docking
he was lightheaded.
did not like having something stuck up itself, so it started to spin out of control.
Wait, it was literally the scene from Interstellar?
Yeah, it was. They were spinning out of control super fast, and they couldn't undock for quite a bit, and so they were going kind of rapidly out of control, and so yeah, they eventually had to undock. However, it did prove the capability that the US could dock, because at the end of the day, this was all to lead. Like, the Soviets didn't give a shit about docking this time, I would say. Later on they were, but this time
the Soviets cared way more about sounding.
Yeah. The US was.
Everyone shut up.
The US needed to. Yeah, I was just like, I'm gonna fast on.
But like power through that one.
Yeah. The US needed to do things to actually get them to the moon. While the Soviet space program, the Soviet moon program, never really got off the ground.
Yeah.
Have we got that sound effect in this?
I not in Discord, but I'm capable of adding that.
Oh, what do we
add it to the? We can find it online. I'll grab it and add it to the sample.
God damn it! That scared the shit out of me.
Our upset crowd.
All right. I want to briefly explain something to you about the Soviet space program and also Russia as a country in general. As a term, it's called Smekalka. Has anybody heard of this term before?
Only when you told it to me.
Yeah, I explained it to Tim and Skipsy. Smekalka roughly translates to native wit. The concept of Smekalka is this idea that Russians have this capability of kind of improvising and finding interesting ways to solve certain problems.
Yes.
Without actually addressing the original problem that led them to get into this situation in the first place. We've seen this in modern times, in the current situation. That's like, but one example I want to actually bring up is there's a very famous example of this. The Russian army is that the Russians are not given socks when they're in the army. They're given these sheets of cloth that they wrap around their feet. And to do so, like to learn how to do that is almost like a trial of like to prove you're worthy to be in the army, and it's almost like this some way like a way into being put into adulthood, like a transformation to adulthood.
It's like a rite of passage.
Yeah, rite of passage. That's exact words. Yeah, and so they would like it's essentially a really long piece of cloth tie around your foot and then around your leg and stuff. And they would like claim Smekalka. It's the Russian wit, not like addressing the fact that the Russians can't provide socks to their troops. But
Also to point out, the car in the top left has a spare wheel on the back. He just didn't put it
Oh
on.
yeah.
He just took off the old one and strapped a log to it instead.
Yeah,
Well, they need that
but
spare
like,
wheel just in case. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He said, what? Another flat?
Just in case.
Well, no, it's
We
exactly
already
what
had the log.
it's exactly what Krusty said. It's a solution that does nothing to address the fact that the other three wheels will fall off eventually.
yeah,
Well, that's why
But
you
it's-
keep the other one.
Right.
Because they don't have another log. Silly.
yeah, and they take this very seriously, and it's promoted like quite consistently in Russia. It's the concept of Smekalka. Like I always like this one with the truck, but it's a fuel truck that's disguised as a wood log truck.
Yeah, it
You're-
reminds me of
you're-
it reminds me of the house tank that was used for that music video.
Yeah, and it's just the fact that like you're not addressing the problem that your fuel trucks keep being blown up in war. Maybe you should try, if you want to really solve the problem, try and find to stop that from happening. But the reason I bring this up is that this is a common meme and thing I've heard about from not only my father but like from many of my friends when talking about the space race. And it's this damn meme that pisses me off so much. It's about the ballpoint pens in space.
Me
Oh,
too, Krusty. I'm right here with you.
Yeah, because like this idea that the NASA spent millions and millions of dollars on this pen to write in space because you can't use a regular pen. One, to develop the pen itself, this concept probably didn't cost millions and millions of dollars. What cost millions and millions of dollars was to manufacture these pens, like in a large scale, to provide to like almost every employee at NASA and also people who want just to buy them. Okay, but the response is yes, but the USSR used pencil. Simple, easy way to do it. No money required. Here's the problem. Pencil tips are made out of graphite. Okay?
Oh no.
Graphite, when made with friction, creates all these graphite particles. I don't know how I feel about graphite particles in a zero-G confined space, if you're getting what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's yeah.
It gets dusty.
Yeah, and also gets in your lungs and lots of terminal illnesses. But I'm going to change a little bit of the pace of this because I actually want to promote something that the Soviets did really well. It's probably
Is
the
that a
best.
robot?
Well, yeah, kind of. Not
It's an
really,
ice cream
but
machine.
yeah. The Soviets did something that was really cool, and I actually want homage to it. And that was their Venera program, which is their exploration of Venus. But it did need some context. The reason why the Soviets were so interested in Venus mostly comes down to the fact that the Americans were no longer interested.
Nice image. Love that one.
You see, in the early 1960s, the U.S. became the first country ever to send a probe to another planet in 1962, being the Mariner 2. And they did a bunch of other orbits and missions and things like that to study the planet itself. And what they came to the conclusion about Venus is that Venus is one of the worst places you want to go. If I can explain the surface of Venus to you, just imagine the. Let's put it this way: if you were to go to Venus and you landed right on the surface of it, think Ocean Gate. That's your situation you've got
17
there.
billion tons of pressure just
Mhm.
compressing you in 5 seconds.
Yeah. So Venus's atmosphere is really thick, and it's almost like if you were walking through it, it'd be like walking through water. Like think so much humidity to the like you could swim kind of in the surface of Venus. That makes sense. With super high temperatures, the hottest planet in the solar system, like this place sucks just to land on. And to be fair, all the information you could learn about Venus, you can practically learn from orbit. So when the U.S. learned about this after their many missions, they were like, "Yeah, we're out. We're not going to attempt to land on this planet. This planet sucks." Mars is a much interesting prospect because you can at least land on it and like do things there and study the rocks and materials. And also the other parts of the solar system are pretty cool as well. And this kind of goes into the Soviet Mars missions, which to say they were a okay scientific venture was Eh,
I've seen a lot of failures.
Bailey,
I'm seeing a lot of missions just named Mars. Indicates that they never made it to publication.
Well, that I respect them. Sputnik 22, just like as a hey, look, it's a nostalgic thing. We'll put Sputnik mission. Yeah, a lot of these actually like either never go out off the ground or left Earth atmosphere. Now they did actually, and it's this is where things get a little complicated. They are the first country to land something on Mars.
Lander crash.
Well.
Thank you.
I was trying to wait for a good time to throw that in.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. So actually, this is their entire Mars portfolio.
Hell yeah.
So they had 2 successes, 2 partial failures, and the rest were failures.
We love Mars.
So Mars 1 crashed on the planet, and so this doesn't count. Mars 2, which looks exactly identical, so I don't need to change the picture. Mars 2, and also, like you said, Skipsy, a spherical.
I know, that was what I thought as soon as you showed this, was get another metal sphere.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Mars 2 did eventually soft land on the planet. How long do you think it lived for? I mean, it could be a couple of years, months, 11 seconds. Which one do you think?
3 hours. 3 hours. This is my guess.
Still functioning, I'm gonna guess.
Well, I gave you a clue. It's 11 seconds.
Oh,
damn! Picture looks great.
it took this picture, and I've seen some people actually on forums. At the time, it wasn't. It was that it was dying while I was trying to take this photo. While the U.S. and I have to say something. I'm going to glaze America for a second because I don't think you pay respects to your Mars mission or Mars projects as much as you should. Because every single mission the U.S. has sent to Mars has been an absolute success. Okay, like a track record. Track record that has never been seen anywhere ever. Okay, so Viking 1 was the U.S. first attempt to land on Mars. And it did in 1975, and it lived much longer than the engineers had predicted it to live. Okay, and this is a common theme in JPL and NASA's Mars program, is that you have these amazing things that just won't die. I've kind of compiled some memes, but they are hinted in truth. The Opportunity rover was expected to live 90 days. It operated for 5,500.
That's sick.
Yeah. Currently, Curiosity was expected to survive for 3 years. It is on its 11th year and still demanding more missions. And they can't give him they can't find more missions to give it. It even has a torn tire, and it is still going.
I remember when the tire was torn. I remember that was news.
Yeah.
Also, you say that we don't pay enough respect to our Mars missions. I posted in the chat. I literally have a Lego Perseverance on my desk right now.
Oh, nice.
Oh, no.
Sweet.
Yeah, even Ingenuity, which is the little drone they sent recently on the Perseverance mission, and it was designed to have 5 flights. It sadly died, but on its 72nd flight. So everything that like the US has done on Mars has just been not only a success, but an overwhelming, like almost too much of a success that it's like becoming a bit of a problem of how successful the Mars missions have been. So while yes, the USSR could claim the first landing on Mars, I'm not really gonna give it to them because it's just simply like it's just not even a competition of how successful the US has been on Mars. Like not even mentioning the current missions occurring on Mars, but even the previous ones have all been just major successes. But this kind of like homes a point, but we're gonna get back to Venus for a second. So, like I said, the Soviets weren't doing so well on Mars. The US was doing pretty good on Mars. The US kind of got bored of Venus, and so the Soviets were like, Venus is the perfect planet to start record our data and study a bit more. So they were ambitious to land on Venus, and I respect them for that. But you have to remember, it kind of comes down to the fact that the US just was literally interested in anything else that wasn't Venus at this time. So how did the Venera missions go? They went pretty. It's like a 50-ish% success rate. I color coded it for you just so you.
Hey, they got better as time progressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, not awful considering how shit Venus is as well.
Yeah, how do you land on Venus?
And it is an impressive. It is such an impressive feat, I must admit. And they did it in 1970 with Venera 7, first object landing on Venus. It lasted actually slightly longer than expected. I think they were expecting it to last maybe 15 or 20 minutes on the surface. I think it lasted just over an hour, I want to say. This was followed by Venera 8 and 9, and even failed Venera missions. But with Venera 14, I believe they actually were able to take photos of the surface of Venus.
Yo, is this a real actual photo?
This is a real actual photo.
Goddamn.
Looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like they have spikes on the rim to stop any demon Venus or Martian climbing up the side.
Yeah,
true. Minecraft strategies right there.
Yeah, this is the Doomslayer of Venus.
Yeah. Not only did they take photos of, they recorded audio.
Ooh, I want to see this.
Ooh.
What you're hearing right now is the winds and the landing of the probe. However, I'm gonna pause 1 second. There's a little audio thing I want you to hear in this. You'll hear it.
That sounded like a pop.
Okay. I'm glad that everybody heard that. Okay. So, what happens is when it landed well. That's all good and stuff. And this little arm comes out. The noise that thing made was not the arm. It was the lens cap for the camera. Now, this arm was designed to measure the surface material of Venus. And when they got the measurements back, they kind of concluded that they weren't measuring the surface of Venus. Would anyone like to take a guess what they were measuring the surface of?
I'm gonna guess the lens cap of the camera.
Skipty, you get a gold star.
Yay!
Yeah, after all of that, after months of traveling, the massive amount of engineering and ingenuity that had to go into landing on Venus, they finally were able to try and measure the surface of Venus, and it was on the side of a lens cap. In fact, you can actually hear it in the audio. Oh wait, sorry, that was the drilling. But yes, this is the drilling of the arm.
Huh.
But yeah, so they unfortunately it didn't go all as planned. Unfortunately for them, but it's still an amazing achievement, and the US still has never caught up to this achievement. They plan to with Da Vinci, which is coming soon, maybe
Da Vinci
in 2030. But we'll have to kind of like see if that is fully funded and actually like production and things like that. But I actually just want to like bring it back to my overall point.
Can I, Max? How much do I have to pay you for you to give me Krusty in cute cat poses?
Oh, you don't even understand. That question's already been answered by Krusty.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Krusty. You're on the ball.
I was like,
Krusty found me and was like, "Hey, what would it take you to draw more pictures of cats in space?" And I was like, "Say less."
Say less.
Easy enough.
I'm playing 60 chess over here. But like, I'm gonna bring it back down to my overall point, because even though this is an amazing attempt by the Soviets, by this time in U.S. space program, the U.S. had already visited Neptune.
Yeah.
Did we take pictures of the surface of Neptune?
It's big and wet.
There's not really a surface.
point checkmate. All right.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, even at this point, you guys were so bored of going to the moon that you stopped doing it. And by the way, that is the official stopped going.
This is
You had no
boring.
interest anymore. It was boring. In fact, I always bring this up to people, but like Apollo 13, before it had its incident, barely anybody was watching Apollo because the Beatles had broken up, and that was more interesting than Apollo 13. Essentially, no one wanted to watch the moon landings anymore.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is a really good song,
Yeah.
Not about LSD, apparently.
Oh,
But also during this point in time, the US had already explored essentially every major celestial object in the solar system. Not only that, they had already started to program their way to leave the solar system and also take photos of the universe around us. Not only that, you were so bored you built a wacky ass fucking quote unquote reusable spacecraft. Which while its two major incidents are well known, was a very safe spacecraft to use. It's so much safe that the fact that the US allowed itself to have the international community join them on these trips. And
I've always been curious
I
about that. Has anyone ever actually died in space, like where the
well,
atmosphere stops?
we're gonna get to this topic literally in the next 2 or 3
Oh,
slides.
okay.
Because I actually thought about this. Like, it's only fair if I bring about I talk about American failures, and I think it kind of correlates really well with the reason why the Soviets had failure. But I'm not gonna use Challenger and Columbia as examples, and the reason why I don't examples, these mistakes weren't made to do things faster or to get to things first. These were failures due to budget restrictions, due to just misunderstandings of the capabilities of the technology that was applied, and also just because the space shuttle was so successful, the sort of like as like things like airplanes, for example, get more safer, the sort of like expectation that something would go wrong decreases, which unironically makes it riskier as things get less riskier, if that makes sense.
It's
you have to pay less
Yeah, that
attention
makes
to the
sense.
details.
it's the Dark Souls boss philosophy. You can't just
Mm.
because you've figured it out doesn't mean you can relax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like playing Monster Hunter. The boss is still gonna murk you if you fuck around.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a good example of where the US rushed things and it went wrong. And I think every single NASA employee like can remember this date essentially. I'm just bringing the date now because I don't remember it. Okay, I've got the date.
You're not an NASA employee, clearly.
Yeah. This is the picture of Apollo 1. And everybody in NASA knows this picture, knows this crew, and knows the date that changed NASA's fate. And you could ask them, if you ever meet a NASA employee, you can ask them what day changed NASA forever. And that was February 21st, 1967. This is the crew of Apollo 1. And this photo here doesn't really interest me too much. It's this photo here. Now, I don't know if any of you have met astronauts or people who work in the aerospace industry, but these are like the least faithful, least what's the word I'm thinking of?
Religious?
Religious, like
Superstitious.
Agnostic, atheist.
The most atheistic.
yeah, I guess. So like anti
Least superstitious.
Yeah, least superstitious.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
word. Yeah. People you're ever going to meet. Okay. And so the reason why this photo is really interesting is because the crew of Apollo 1 knew that the Apollo 1 capsule was flawed. It was rushed and wasn't really ready, and they were fully aware of that. But the higher ups in the government were very forceful to make sure this happens now because we must beat the Soviets. And when you're an engineer or an astronaut, options to change the fundamentals of the craft you're flying in, the only really option you have is to pray. I always like this saying from astronauts, like when the rocket launches, they never like cross their fingers as like a sign of good luck because they have so much trust and faith in the engineers who built the rocket. So the idea of three astronauts praying to the capsule is kind of like a very significant thing. So February 21st, 1967. Unfortunately, the crew of Apollo 1 died.
Oh.
They didn't even
grisly
get
images.
Yeah, they didn't
I've
even
not
get
seen
off
those images before. That's rough.
Yeah, they didn't even get off the ground. The rocket never even launched. I can't remember the specific details, but an oxygen leak happened inside the capsule that was flammable, and it caused a fire inside the capsule. And due to the pressurization of the capsule, it just led to a massive inferno and explosion. If you are curious, there's actually audio recordings of this event as it happens.
Ooh.
So
I feel like, ironically, without context, I've probably heard them before, but I couldn't tell you because I saw the dramatization of it. I think I don't know the piece of media that it was, but there's something out there that like has depicted this on film, like recreation almost.
Yeah, I think First Man had a scene in it.
That must have been.
Images give me like Dead Space.
I know, that
vibes,
was the
and
first thing I thought. Was it? This is
that's
the
so bad to happen in real life.
That is the iconography. These pictures are how like death in space is depicted, where it's just like chunks are missing. You know, whatever happened to these things was sudden and unavoidable.
It's like vicious.
That was a
Like at
slap
a
in the
physical
face,
level.
though. They didn't even die in space. They never got off the ground.
Yeah.
The rocket was still in park position. But this was all due to rushing to be the first. And I can guarantee you that this changed NASA forever. This is when NASA put, because you got to remember, all the guys who were astronauts were all these kind of like wild people who were test pilots who were like wanting to live on the edge and stuff. And what was really funny is when these died, and NASA, like I said, we're changing our policy, we're becoming way stricter on like safety regulations. Funny enough, the rest of the astronauts were actually protesting this idea because they saw it as this is how we do things. We are expecting potential death if it happens. But NASA didn't care. NASA were like, no, we're putting safety first. There has to be what's the point of sending a man to the moon to let them just die there? That would be worse than not even getting to the moon in the first place.
True.
And so NASA changed. And I want to make a reference to this document, which is free online and downloadable PDF. I really respect NASA for doing this. And they actually released it public domain in the 60s, in the 70s, sorry, when they're still going to the moon. And what you're looking at here is what made Apollo a success. I think its alternative title is better. It's a IKEA instruction booklet to how to get to the moon. That is essentially what it is. Now, I recommend anybody to read this, and I do mean it when I say if you had all the money in the world, or you're a country who wants to do a moon, who wants to land on the moon, just read this book. It gives you a one-to-one guide on how to get to the moon.
She give us some flat earthers too. They need to read up on this a little bit.
It literally every single detail down to like the bolts being attached to the landing legs and the weight distribution. It gives you all this information. Now, I must admit, I've skimmed through this and haven't fully read it because some of the stuff I just don't really understand. However, what I liked about this book was the amount of, and this is where Max's golden word came in, redundancies NASA had for every single aspect of the Apollo missions. Everything from like the simplest like knob not working or the simplest program was malfunctioning, and even I find the funniest is the rare case that if you were landed on the moon and you tried to launch off the surface of the moon that the engines didn't start. They had redundancies for all these issues, every single one of them. I like my favorite one because it was like it kind of read out like a tech support feature where it was like, okay, so the engines don't start when you're on the surface of the moon. What do you do next? Okay, have you tried turning it on and off and on again? Okay, that didn't work. Okay, whoever was the least out in space, well, out on the moon, put on your suit, there's a bolt cutters in one of the cupboards. Take the bolt cutters, cut out some of the connection points of the launch vehicle from the landing legs, and like essentially hammer your shit away to get yourself back into space. But it's a very funny read, and I recommend.
It's a funny read.
No, it's just like the way they're like nonchalant, like
I guess it's less gravity. They're like probably be able to push. There's less friction. You can
Jump
push
really hard.
Throw yourself into space.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was just a lot of redundancies. And here's the thing: the Apollo 11 mission had just look at the Wikipedia page for it. Had so many failures on it. Everything almost failed on it. But the reason why it was a success was redundancy. There was a solution to every problem on these missions. And some people would mention about American failures. What about Apollo 13? That was a failure. Well, no. The reason why those men are alive today, well, I don't know if they're alive today, but they
survived the trip.
Survived the trip was due to redundancies. In fact, I thought I would show this, and now we're not streaming, I can actually share this. I want to show you a comparison to actually what happened on 13, because I think like Hollywood is over dramatized. So we have the Houston, we have a problem scene, as we all. So he turns. I don't know if it's playing on the thing.
It is.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I've never watched this movie.
I've actually seen it. I watched it when I was really young too, probably way earlier than I should have.
There's a lot of Tom Hanks stuff that I have not watched. He's probably my biggest blind spot.
I completely forgot Tom Hanks and Kevin Bacon were in this movie.
Yeah. Here's the thing though, if Krusty's about to tell me that this movie isn't like entirely one-to-one or realistic with the events that happened, then I have no plans on rewatching it. I'd rather just know the actual history.
I'd rather watch a documentary that tells me how it really happened.
Yeah, no, or read about it. Yeah. Is my preference.
Houston, we have a problem. We have a main bus B undervolt. We've got a lot of thruster activity here, Houston.
It's really funny that Woody originally played an astronaut.
You are a
What's really funny about that in Forrest Gump is it Ganesh, the actor, who's in this movie as well. He was astronaut supposed to be on Apollo 13. He in Forrest Gump, who plays Lieutenant Dan, is like, the day you win the Medal of Honor, like that's the day where I become an astronaut. And this movie, they're both astronauts.
That's really funny.
So what I was trying to get to this point in this film is that everybody intensity, very like freaked out, what to do and stuff. And then in the movie in general, mission control guys are freaking out and shouting at you and things like that. In reality, and don't be wrong, to answer your question, Colin, no, the movie is very accurate. I must say, it's very accurate. But in reality, though, this is kind of the reaction that Mission Control had during Apollo 13.
Go, guys. We've had a hardware restart. I don't know what it was. Okay. GNC, you want to look at it? See if you see any problem? Roger, we're copying it, Capcom. We see a hardware restart. You see an AC bus undervolt there, guidance? Or ECOM? Negative, flight. I believe the crew reported it. We got a main B undervolt. Okay, flight. We've got some instrumentation flights. Let me add them up.
So yeah, not as freaked out as depicted just in the movie. Actually, one accurate scene though, of Wraith Cullen is there's a scene where because essentially their oxygen filter is damaged, so they're not going to be able to breathe oxygen. So what they have to do is they have to build a device that gets the oxygen back into the systems to allow for oxygen to be flowing properly. And so what they had to do was take a box that had a circle hole in as its main ventilation, and fit it with a square unit. And in the movie, it is portrayed where mission control guys are like, "All right, guys, we need to find a way to put this square inside this circle." And then like what they come up with is like this massive thing that's like been duct taped together. Literally, I'm not even kidding. They use duct tape.
I remember the scene actually. Like it's coming back to me as you're saying this. It's a really standout scene.
And it's actually, you might not be able to see it here in the video, but you can see actually them holding it. It was a duct tape pipe put together, like with like rough materials and things like that they had left around. However, in reality, there was never this conversation of like, oh, we need to put the square in the circle. No, they already knew that this was a potential hazard and had it implemented in one of the redundancies. They already knew.
So that
like,
was
okay, you got to grab your duct tape and you're gonna find a surprising amount of circles that have square holes.
So
Yeah.
Now,
I can almost like picture myself in the writing room for that scene of someone saying, "Okay, but they had already planned for this," and one of the writers saying, "No one's gonna believe that NASA had planned to have these two objects attached to one another. We have to make it seem like they came up with it on the fly."
Yeah, no, exactly. It's for like, to be fair, I've always said the reason why I like Apollo 13 is because they took out all the boring things and made it entertaining. So like, I
they
respect
made it a good
the
movie. They made it a good movie.
They made a good movie.
Makers
Yeah.
make good
It's
movies.
like the inverse. What was it, Pearl Harbor, where that one is just exactly as insane as the actual fight was.
Yeah.
Or Midway,
Yeah.
sorry, Midway.
Yeah, I was going to say Pearl Harbor by Michael Bay is
By
a very
Michael Bay.
historically accurate film.
Yeah,
Veterans loved that movie.
I can't. Oh, sorry. It can't be said the same with like when it comes to redundancies for the Russians. A good example: Soyuz. First Soyuz mission, which Soyuz, by the way, is still used today.
Oh, Skippy, just so you know, inside it might seem like it's not a ball, but you see.
No, I see it. I see the
You
ball. I see the ball.
Still spherical shape.
Vladimir Komarov was the pilot for the first Soyuz mission, and he had the exact same complaints that the Apollo 1 crew had with engineers, saying that this is a very rushed job, essentially. They didn't care, and they put him on a Soyuz 1 rocket, and they blew him up into space, and one of the problems they had was the parachute wouldn't. So there was no slowing down. I can't confirm this report. Someone could correct me in the comment section. But a Turkish radio station was able to pick up his broadcast, and apparently he was cursing the names of the engineers who had developed the capsule.
I did hear this. I hear something similar. I didn't
I
realize
heard
it was like,
I heard that story too.
yeah. I don't know if it's real, but yeah, definitely have that story.
But he actually, before the mission, demanded that he would have an open casket. In fact, he demanded that everyone would see his body when he got retrieved. And they did. They kept their promise. Now
I've seen the image. I've seen the image.
I've censored it because of streaming purposes, but if anybody was willing to see this, you can Google it, or I can just lift the black box if you want it.
Oh, lift the black box.
Well, actually, yeah, I'm gonna say it's not almost as like bad as you would like. It's as bad as you would think, but it's like if you don't know what you're looking at, like context wise, it's not even that bad. But context wise, it's like the worst thing you could ever see.
Dramatic reveal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen this image before.
It's not too bad, but yeah.
That's a person.
Ooh. That I don't know if that gets to be.
I'm pretty sure John Carpenter dug that up in Antarctica.
Yeah. I was gonna say, again, context changes everything for this image.
Yeah.
It's important to know.
Just put that back. Put that back.
I feel like it's very easy sometimes for people to forget that, like, in the face of the raw mechanical power of the universe, the human body is very easily turned into goop.
I know. That's what pisses me off so much about the fucking main character energy of CEOs. Is like Elon Musk sincerely believes that he is better than space, and that is hilarious. He could have just as easily been on the Ocean Gate, and like he just will never come to terms with that.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's why we have redundancies.
We cannot see your screen.
The space Google Slides Opera. There's a lot of T's.
It is a lot of
T's. It's like glitched out on the stream. You might close stream, open stream. It'll probably fix it.
And yeah, there we go.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, you're good now.
So Skips, to answer your question about people dying in space or like actually in space. The only free people who've ever died above the Kármán line are these free men here. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce their names.
Yet another victory for the mighty Russian Empire.
Yuri Dobrovolsky, Viktor
Yeah.
Patsayev,
Now,
and
the
Vladislav
reason
Volkov.
their death occurred was a malfunction in their, I believe it was a ventilation system that once they had undocked from their current trajectory, essentially led in the vacuum of space into their capsule.
Nice.
And so, from what I remember from the reports, when they found the bodies, they could tell that the cosmonauts were attempting to do anything they could to plug out this hole. It wasn't unfortunately enough, and they essentially died and burnt up in the atmosphere on re-entry. And the capsule smashed into the ground. So even if they had survived the they would have been essentially pulverized by the amount of force.
Yeah.
But all these 7 men died in a very common thing: to achieve to be the first for propaganda purposes, skipping safety regulations and stuff like that.
Skipping due process.
Yeah, but and I don't, and this is why I kind of don't like about the space race in general, is I don't really like this idea. It's hard to put into words, but I'm a big space exploration person. I love space and everything. And I think this is a perfect example of why we shouldn't be really competing for stuff in space. And if I couldn't say it well enough, I think someone can, because everybody remembers JFK's famous speech, why we choose to go to the moon. But that's not my favorite JFK speech. In fact, this is my favorite JFK speech that not a lot of people are aware of. I'll play now.
Finally, in a field where the United States.
Oh.
Finally, in a field where the United States and the Soviet Union have a special capacity in the field of space, there is room for new cooperation, for further joint efforts in the regulation and exploration of space. I include among these possibilities a joint expedition to the moon. Space offers no problems of sovereignty. By resolution of this assembly, the members of the United Nations have forsworn any claim to territorial rights in outer space or on celestial bodies, and declared that international law and the United Nations Charter will apply. Why, therefore, should man's first flight to the moon be a matter of national competition? Why should the United States and the Soviet Union, in preparing for such expeditions, become involved in immense duplications of research, construction, and expenditure?
Dude, that speech would go so fucking hard in like a cyberspace video game as like something that plays, and then it's immediately showing you like thousands of years into the future when like that speech is just rendered completely irrelevant because there's, lawlessness and everybody's claiming territories on celestial bodies. Oh, good speech though. Fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's my overall point. I think like something we can learn from the space race is that both countries achieved absolutely amazing feats in technological exploration. And in fact, some of the best cooperation between the two major rivals occurred in space programs. However, this kind of gets away from my point, though. And my point being that this idea that there was a Soviet supremacy in space. Now, don't get me wrong, I love space cooperation, and I love the idea of the Soviets experimenting their own way with space. But I just can't buy this idea that the Soviets were somehow in a better position for space exploration. Even the most diehard fans of the Soviet space program will bring up the Buran, and I had a whole section on Buran, but I had to cut it out because it would have been too long. But Buran was the copy and paste of the space shuttle. Now, it was pretty good and pretty capable for its one flight, but
Okay.
But a lot of the things that people will present about the Buran is that how it was so much more capable than the space shuttle. It really wasn't. Like one of the biggest ones was autopiloted, so you didn't have to have crew on board. The space shuttle could do that, by the way, but they just never needed to do that. They talk about how it land itself and like land accurately. And in its first test flight, it did automatically land on the runway. However, it did kind of go over the runway and surpass the runway and into a field. Though we don't need to talk about
for another day.
For another day. But let alone the capabilities of these two crafts. Just look at how the Americans treat their space shuttle history compared to how Russians treat their space shuttle history. Like, I mean, to be actually fair, it's destroyed now because this building collapsed on top of it due to a lack of maintenance. But anyway, we're here for the main showdown. The main showdown being is it going to load? Oh, there you go. The moon.
The moon.
Dun, 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 dun. We all know the story. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin land on the moon. Good job. You did it, guys. You became the first. The Soviets did actually have a moon program. They actually had built a lunar lander.
Yet another goddamn steel ball.
Look at that ball. Look at that round bitch. I see.
All I'm gonna say is, if you looked at the Soyuz 11 capsule, the one that made the ground was actually a cylinder, and that's the only one where the people died in space.
Yes, you're right.
Lessons learned.
Superical. Spherical.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say that word. Superiorical.
Yeah. They even had an EVA suit. That was pretty cool. And they had a rocket called the N1. Now, the N1 was an interesting attempt of getting cosmonauts into space. Well, one of its unique features, it had a lot of engines. Now, this is actually somewhat an advantage for like having lots of engines is a bit of a I feel like the N1 has kind of given having lots of engines a bad name. But having lots of engines means that in fact, it's redundancy. If one fails, you can actually keep the rocket going. Depending on how many engines you have, and Tim will probably know this better than me, depending on how many engines you have like a limit of how many rockets fail, engines can fail before your rocket starts to go to ship. But the N1's legacy, well, I'm going to just show you the clip of the second launch attempt here.
So point.
The music's cool.
They were playing. They had a live orchestra.
Oh,
That's fine, right? That's fine. It's fine. Ooh.
my God.
It's like a Hollywood explosion.
Well, actually, funny enough, at the time, it might be in the top 5 at the moment, but it is one of the largest non-nuclear explosions of all time.
Damn.
Hey,
Because it's all fucking rocket fuel.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, and in fact, the Soviet Union didn't actually admit it failed. The U.S. was aware of it just because of how loud the explosion was.
Nothing blew up? Yes, it did. We heard it.
Yeah,
That guy's not going to be in the N rocket third attempt.
Oof.
Yeah. So all 4 of the N1 launches ended in failure, and by the time of the 4th launch, the Americans already started getting bored of going to the moon. So the Soviets just sort of gave up. They just never pursued it.
It was for the love of the science, Krusty.
And but I just want to ask a question to the American audience in the crowd here. I'm gonna put a question out to you all.
Yeah, because we don't hear your voices enough in the,
Yeah.
space.
Shut up, you Brit.
I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna take a scenario from many fantasy and alternate history shows and books and stuff. But what would have happened if the Soviets had landed on the moon first? Do you honestly expect me to believe that the Americans would have just gone, yeah, well, they did it first, I guess we'll just give up and do something else?
Absolutely not.
I could legitimately put money on that outcome. If it was the exact scenario but flipped, where Russia had multiple consecutive moon landings, did their testing, decided they were bored. Like, we also decided we were bored after we'd done enough on the moon. I think maybe the best case scenario would have been that it would have pushed Americans into, like, doing something more extreme, like actually setting up a base. If Russia beat us to the moon, then we would have had to be the ones to make an encampment there, right?
Yeah. Actually, that's the plot of For All Mankind. Is that because the Soviets put someone on the moon, the Americans like, okay, we got to like put bases on this thing.
Yeah, that's what I think would have happened.
Yeah. Well, exactly my point. But if I have to even push further home to how the Soviets didn't win the space race, I mean, just look at the current launch providers of the United States currently. I mean, this is just the launch providers that we have today. Not mentioning the ones that we've had before and the ones that are coming soon. I mean, we even can land rockets. Oh, okay, not you. Fuck you. No. Go sit in the corner. Go sit in the fucking corner where you belong. Yeah, that's where you belong.
All right.
But no, we have the capability of landing rockets at this point. I mean, I should say you guys have the capability of landing at this point. As we are speaking right now, two of the largest launch vehicles are currently in their testing phase. One of them is fully reusable, which has never been done on a rocket. Not only the fact it's currently flying as we speak. Not only that, it can fucking land itself.
Yeah, seeing this video was super impressive.
I really want to figure out when the next like exciting test launch is gonna be, just so I can have Krusty and Tim. And I pitched this to Swag already. I want to do like live stream watch-alongs of rocket tests with you two.
It'd be fun.
11th of January.
Damn, that's right before my birthday. It's the day before my birthday.
Well, there you go. You got something exciting to look
Hell
forward
yeah.
to. In addition,
that's where Flight 7's expected. Oh yeah, by the way, due to the new FAA assignment for Starship, we're going to be seeing this twice a month.
These catches.
Man.
Yeah.
That's I'll save this.
Cool.
I'll save this for when you're wrapping up.
Earth-sized baseball game.
I have final thoughts about all of this.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, if this doesn't say the U.S. has won the space race, I mean, we can look at what Russia's doing currently.
Failing to invade a tiny country.
Genocide.
Yeah. So
amongst other things.
Hacking YouTube channels for no reason.
So what has Russia been up in the space situation the last couple of decades? Well, they're still using Soyuz, which is just an R7, which is was built in the 50s. That's pretty cool, I guess. They still use the Proton, which is another rocket that was built in the 60s. There's some they were kind of fucking around with mirrors in space in the 90s. They wanted to create artificial sunlight for some.
It was for crops. I remember this. Yeah,
half the country is covered in snow.
They were trying to create artificial sunlight so they could grow crops in inhabitable times of the year. I remember reading about that.
Yeah, it'd be really annoying though if you're trying to sleep.
Fuck that! It's Russia. You do the Russian sun never sets.
I guess that would be fucking psychopathic.
Yeah.
When the crops to grow up, and it's like, yeah, when do I get to sleep? I need to grow up.
And also to just by the way, to actually like make it just stay on Russia, you would need a geostationary orbit. So if they didn't do a geostationary orbit, people would just be like woken up in the middle of the night by just a bunch of sunlight.
You know what? That's also ultimate hater move. You can't figure out how to get it geostationary, so you just make a sun that like bothers people. Just make
What
the
a
sun
prank that
start
would be.
rising.
Also, legitimately, something about this feels like a great way to like write or base a sci-fi book. Just having a big artificial sun that someone loses control of, and then it just starts being a hassle for
But they're
everyone
just
on
a
Earth.
fucking troll about it. I love that.
Yeah. They're like, no, we didn't lose control. This is intentional. And then people are like, then stop doing it, or else we'll invade you and make you stop. And they're like, nah, fuck you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they did build like a really nice chunk of the ISS.
I see.
That's pretty.
Is it the
That's
part
pretty.
that's a steel ball?
Yeah.
God damn it.
And also, I mean, they built all of this parts and stuff as well. It was just connected to the end.
They couldn't
You
help
just take an X-ray and it's just a concentric series of balls.
Yeah. It definitely doesn't have any leaking problems. I've been told by the Russians.
Oh, that's the part that's absolutely not leaking for sure. Trust us.
Oh, they also tried to nearly. Well, they actually nearly shot it down. The ISS with an anti-satellite missile. I remember reporting that story on the Surfswag channel. That was a funny throwback.
Yeah.
They also tried to land on the moon recently, and that didn't go too well. Oh yeah, the ISS is shutting down because part in the program. I wonder why they can't. Yeah. But overall, really, the key to having a really successful space program is you sort of have to have an economy to run a space program.
I see.
And stability. And not having your main launch site being in another fucking country.
Ooh.
Yes, Russia's main launch site is in Kazakhstan, not in Russia. Which is funny because on March of 2023, Kazakh government stopped Russia from actually launching. She's seizing all their equipment.
Brilliant
So,
stuff, isn't it?
my advice to Putin: maybe just take a chill pill, have a Snickers, build that cool ISS replica you guys wanted to.
There's the ball.
Yeah. Well, there's. And I'm sure it will go as well as last time with your Mir station. That definitely didn't have any sort of disease-ridden incidents occurring inside.
This is all the pencils.
Actually, there was very well documented studies about space viruses and bacteria based on the conditions of the Mir.
I love that. Their absolute failure to sanitize wound up being a case study in how dangerous space viruses can be.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the last pictures taken inside the Mir. I do like this meme of just this literally like because you have to remember down NASA astronauts sent up there to help with the deposition stuff. And so the American astronauts kind of like floated in, and were like, "Oh, so this is the place you've been kind of living in this decade. Interesting." But look, at the end of the day, Russia, you could always just hitch a ride in the Chinese lander. There's nothing wrong with being in third place. It's all good. But while I may have American flags on my shoulders here, I just remind the public here that I am in fact British. And
Pretty sure the average British person.
And you might be wondering, France has a space program, Russia has a space program, China, America, Japan, they all have space programs. Does the UK have a space program? They do. And I refuse to say the name of it because it's the most disgusting term I've ever heard. Our space program is called UXA.
Like that's actually how people pronounce it?
UK.
No, everybody just says UK Space Agency because saying UXA is disgusting.
Yeah, it's different to NASA.
Yeah.
Sounds like yuck.
We did build a rocket once. It was called the Black Arrow.
Oh.
And it was actually a really good rocket. But let me explain UK space rocketry in a nutshell. Okay. So you start a space program. You get halfway through building your rocket. Program goes bankrupt. You launch it anyway. It becomes a successful mission. Never launch it again. Don't elaborate further. And that's all you need to know about the UK space program.
Yep. Nice.
I mean, I can almost see the dollar signs in the accountant's eyes. Like, just because you built a successful rocket, but the test wasn't, what do we need to do to build a successful rocket? The test was, how much money does it cost to build a successful rocket? Oh, that much? Okay, we're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of the time anyway, like any successful like learnings of stuff from a lot of our tests, NASA or America usually goes, oh, those are nice.
Yeah.
Takes them.
Yeah, exactly. And but at the end of the day now, we're in this era of the Artemis Accords, which this is actually an outdated photo, joined the Artemis Accords, which is all these countries contributing to explore. And I don't see Russia on the list, but who knows, considering if you put enough money and science into this project, you might get a chance to send one of your citizens to the moon. So there is a chance, slim chance, that Britain becomes the third country to land on the moon.
That would be silly. That would be silly.
In fact, there is a chance that all those countries listed above may beat Russia to landing on the moon.
I see.
Including, what was it, Boxslavia was one of the ones in the top left corner.
Luxembourg.
Bahrain, that's what I was looking at. Bahrain.
Yeah.
Bahrain, Nigeria, Rwanda.
Yeah. The idea of Luxembourg sending an astronaut into
Nigeria's getting in on this. Africa represent. Hell yeah.
Rwanda, yeah. So Russia, this is your time to maybe, I don't know, maybe stop spending your money in one area, or you're just going to be last place to the moon. And that's the end.
Cheers.
The
Clapping.
The main through line that I noticed is that all of the Russian programs seem to, and this is just based off of my understanding of Soviet Russia at the time, they're all operating off of this fear of failure, where they wanted, what they wanted their program to do was build equipment that would handle space perfectly every single time, versus NASA basically assuming that that's impossible and instead spending a lot of their research money and time on redundancies and counter redundancies for inevitable failures. And Russian scientists everyone was so paranoid of failing that they never even acknowledged that it was a possibility in their tests.
Well, I feel like it's the origins of the term, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like I said, like I mentioned, they're still using rocket technology that was developed in the 50s, and they just never went, hey, maybe we should try something new. They just kind of, no, we'll keep the old stuff. Tim might know this, but do you know the main sequence of how Russian rockets ignite their engines?
Yeah, Tim. What were you asking? Sorry.
I was asking,
are you Skippy?
No, are you aware of the main technique of igniting Russian engines today?
I feel like I remember hearing somewhere they stick a flare up the back and just turn on the gas.
You're close. You're very close. I didn't include it in my presentation, but they essentially use a giant matchstick.
And it's like there's rockets that propel it upwards, and the matchstick would rub against it as it's going up and spark the actual big engine. Is that
kind of? They have these metal big poles, and what they'll do is when the rocket is primed for launch, essentially the gases from the fuel will release, and the matches will scrape against the side of the engine nozzle, and it will cause a spark, and that will launch that baby up.
It's fucking Smekalka, just like you said.
Yeah, it's Russia. Yeah,
I think this the way this is designed also kind of speaks to the other kind of main desire for these space programs from a Russian standpoint, because a lot of it wasn't for just the scientific inquiry of it. It was to make Russian or Soviet scientific inquiry look like it was outstanding beyond the scope of what it actually was. Again, like both of these programs had an air of propaganda in them, but the Russian one was also like with the aim of like they did it to make it to like showcase to the world, look guys, look, we're just as good as America, and America was doing it to be like, hey,
we're good.
we have the best.
Yeah.
We have the best. And the USSR was doing it to be like, we're as good as America. And they're two very different kind of propaganda ideals that also influence the way you then, as like a team, work, because you aren't just doing it to get it out fast so that then you don't look like you're doing bad. It's like you like after Apollo 1, you go like, this isn't good enough. This isn't the standard, because internally we have this idea of ourselves as well. Whereas in Russia, it's like we make it work because we survive and thrive from that, like, what was it, the Russian ideal that Krusty mentioned of like putting stuff together, surviving in stressful situations wherever you get. And I mean, that propaganda machine really, I think, butchered a lot of these programs in a long-lasting way.
Yeah, and I was going to say as well, to give credit to the Soviets, though, I mentioned that JFK speech, and the Soviets were actually considering it to do a joint mission to the moon. But unfortunately, when JFK was assassinated, the Soviets didn't really trust what's his name, his vice president.
I should know this.
RBJ?
We just aired a bunch of
Is
these.
it RBJ?
LBJ.
Yeah.
Yeah, RBJ.
Lyndon Baines Johnson.
LBJ.
LBJ. Okay. Yeah, LBJ. Yeah, they didn't really trust LBJ. So they never went ahead with the plan. But if JFK was still alive and managed to get like a second term, there was a high probability that the US and Soviets would have to do a mission to.
Man, there are a lot of people who got assassinated in the 60s and 70s. It would have made the world a lot better right now.
Find me a president that had a higher charisma stat than JFK. On God.
I think Obama is probably the only one.
I was going to say they're tied. In my head, they're tied.